things about Tapestry is you don't have to use everything in it. It's not a case of we go all in on Tapestry. If there's systems that you want to use on paper and combine those with using Tapestry, then sometimes that can work best for settings. There isn't a sort of set, you must do it this way, you must do it this way, you must use these features in Tapestry because you're using Tapestry. Use the bits you want. If you don't want to use certain bits, then don't use them. Maybe move on to them at a time, a year or two down the road when you're ready to use those. So I think that's one reason why it's remained pretty successful. Point three, that's what we're going to move on to mostly, is making best use of the technology that we've got and creating observations in your setting which are seamless and easy. And make that process as simple as possible for you. Again, all sorts of different settings out there, all sorts of different circumstances, but we can talk in more detail about that as well. And fourth point is just to say there's going to be plenty of scope for Q&A, and I will talk about the reflections aspect of Tapestry a little bit as well if there is time. So I mentioned this earlier, the different ways of accessing Tapestry. Of course, you've got the app over there on the left, which is the easy way to get obs into Tapestry, and actually quite a nice way to look at the observations that are there. The web browser over there on the right will get you all the powerful stuff if you're managing a Tapestry setting, which probably a number of you aren't. But if you're doing that, then that is the place where you want to be for doing that work. And slap bang in the middle there, the camera app is definitely worth mentioning, because with that, it's probably the easiest way to get photos or video into your device when you're amongst a busy gang of children. Something that should hopefully run through this training is that you want to get to a position where the technology is as non-intrusive as possible in your day and in what you're doing with the children, so it can be whipped out and snaps taken, possibly video taken, if that's something that you want to do, and then put away, so it doesn't become this thing that distracts children from what they're doing. I'm very much of the opinion that reception classes and below should have a very minimal amount of technology in them, because of the world in which we live at the moment, with all this sort of unregulated bombardment of information in houses and everything. So yeah, keeping the devices as discreet and out of the way as possible is very important. The camera app doesn't need to be online. You can get it out. You don't need to unlock your device normally. You just swipe across and take a few photos and put it away. Just going to let those people in. Teams has not adjusted to my setting, but there we go. So I think I've got one more slide to show in this setup. That's right. So if you are thinking about devices used in your setting to make these observations, devices used to possibly be typing up observations, it's a little bit of a minefield, if I'm perfectly honest with you. There isn't a clear route as to this is the best option for settings. One of the problems that lots of people like using Apple technology for its reliability, and because they know their way around it, there's no doubt about that. But the prices are restrictive. The smaller type iPad devices are now really expensive. They used to be about half the price, and so that makes it something where you might think a bit differently about this. Actually, settings are starting to use devices possibly that are smaller in size, maybe even small-sized smartphones that can be bought, possibly refurbished ones. If anyone wants to talk about that a little bit more with me, I'm very happy to have that conversation, and it's something that I think about quite regularly, because again, we want this technology to work every day that you pick it up. You don't want unreliable stuff in there, but Tapestry doesn't need huge amounts of processing power. It just it's best if your device is stripped down without other stuff on it, and then you can just use it for Tapestry. But it doesn't have to be a really brand new device, a really expensive device necessarily. Yeah, so refurbished Apple phones are something that could be worth thinking about. Android-based phones might be something to think about as well. I won't go down that tech hole too much at this point, because I know people will want to be seeing the app in action, and I know if you are a support staff member, probably you would spend time using the app and possibly forgetting about the rest of the stuff as well. The picture just there on the right, there's two shots there, just to highlight this dictation feature that exists on, it exists on all phones now, and it exists on iPad type devices. So it's very much worth thinking, are there circumstances in which you might want to use dictation? The difficulty is you're in a busy, noisy circumstance. There's lots of children around, there's lots of noise. You start dictating to a device in that situation, it doesn't work very well. If you have 10 minutes of quietness, it may be a really good way to get your comments, your observations into a device. So I'm going to demonstrate that along with the process of making observations. I'm going to just stop sharing there, and I'm going to share over to a mobile device. I'm just seeing that people are still here. Good news. If you want to use the chat, brilliant. If at any point you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, go for it. But there will be Q&A later on as well. Let me just get this thing working. A little bit of a fiddle to mirror over to a mobile device, but thoroughly worth it in these circumstances. So here I am on an iPad, and you'll see down the bottom I've got the Tapestry app there in the middle, and I've also dragged the camera app down there onto the bar at the bottom, so they are there to be accessed very easily. Let's go into the Tapestry app, and you'll see the setup on here, and this is a fake mock account. You see some staff members on here such as Jasmine Seagull and Gemma Sunshine, and myself here. I'm going to go in here with the pin, and this pin situation you might come across is where you have a pin set for your account, which means you go in with those 4 digits. Don't use your bank code to set those. And it has to be said, lots of people find, quite an easy one to remember is actually something that, suits their security circumstances. Again, it's not a bank code, but, you don't want children picking up devices and getting into your account. Now, on the left here are observations, and I apologize for things not being perhaps the most realistic. I've got some mocked up ones here. I've got a couple of pictures of my boys there, and some pictures of some dinosaur models, just to show what a mocked up observation can look like in here. The observations are down the left, and when you tap on one, you get the full view of that observation. On the right, you can see that you can have a number of photos in one observation. You'll see an O next to the title of an observation, which stands for observation, because you can have memos as well, which are notes home to parents. And you can have these things called reflections as well, which I may be able to talk about later. So let's make an observation. You'll see plus button in the top left here, and this will give you, using the app is a very simple way to create an observation. So let's create one here. I'm going to start by typing here. What are we doing today? Let's do dinosaur role play. And there's a section there, looks like a post-it note for some notes. If you want to put some notes in there, you'll want to talk in your setting about, you know, the different aspects that you might record in your notes, whether you always put a note in there. Sometimes it can be good to have quite an extensive note, sometimes just a few words, perhaps no note at all, just some pictures, perhaps a long note but no pictures at all. Okay, so you should be recording, you know, whatever is going to reflect what happened. You'll see, or rather, whatever is of note to those children and their learning. Let me just let that person in. So you'll see you've got take picture there, icon, and that will allow you to take a picture directly into the app. You may well have photos that you've taken that you want to pull into here to put into an observation, and those come from add from library. If I tap on there, you'll see some pictures here that have been taken earlier. Here are some, the block ones are from last week, and you see they've got dates on them, which can be really useful if you're going over, you know, photos that have been taken over the past couple of weeks and you want to upload them into Tapestry. But today I'm going to choose these dinosaur pictures. Here we go, and it queues them up there, ready to be uploaded. You'll see in the top right we've got an upload button, and you can tap that upload button once you have selected a child or some children. In this case, I'm going to choose a few different children. I'm going to choose these 4 children, and you can see them there now, because in this circumstance, I'm imagining that these children are using the dinosaur role play equipment and they're having a fascinating conversation about what's going on there and having a great activity, or perhaps it's an adult-led activity with these children. You know, all sorts of circumstances where you might use dinosaur models in setting. So let's just consider that for a moment. I'll come back to the notes in a moment. But if I tap upload, you'll see it now goes into the account, and you can see it's just working out the pictures. It's uploaded them and it's processing those pictures. And there we go. It's processed them. So they're there as a little preview, and you can see on this observation, as standard, they don't go into the journal to start with. So it says not in journal there. And Tapestry has this lovely situation where if something's not in a journal, then you've just created it. It's in the Tapestry account. People who work in your setting can see it, most probably, but no relatives, no parents can see it at that point. When it goes into the journal, that's the point where it's saved and finished off, where relatives would be able to see that observation, and possibly they would be able to write a comment or press that like button, which has those, you know, horrible Facebook connotations, but can be quite useful for staff as well. So I've put it in there. I've put the observation in there. It doesn't have any notes on it at the moment. Perhaps I've just put that in there and someone else is going to write the notes. But let's go to the bottom right, edit there. And you see I can go straight back in and do whatever I like to this. And you'll see down the bottom here, you've got a couple of useful bits that can be changed. The date and the time goes in when you create this observation, but you can go in and change it. All right. So if you're catching up on weeks and weeks of photos and you're putting some stuff in place, you could backdate it if you need to. All right. And we all know that that type of stuff is necessary from time to time. So let's do some notes. Now, if I was on a fixed keyboard device, I would type there. I can type with this on-screen keyboard. You know, I don't find it particularly fast, an on-screen keyboard, but I'll have a go here. These children invented some great, not too bad today, some great characters as they played with dinosaur models. Now I'm going to shift. You see next to the spacebar there's a microphone, which is a dictate function. So I'm just going to do a little bit of dictation. One of the children talked about the size of the different creatures, full stop. Another child has some interesting things to say about the dinosaur who was just a bag of bones and lying on his side, exclamation mark. We also talked about whether these creatures would all be in existence in the era of the dinosaurs, exclamation mark. Right, I'm being a little bit playful and facetious with my observation there, but you get the idea. Your notes section can contain whatever you want, and the dictate button, you know, if you know, perhaps this isn't for support staff who are going into school, working home, that's it, done. Teachers, managers of settings who will end up, you know, might end up with a device sitting on the sofa at home at some point. You might find that dictating is a wonderful way to get a few sentences into your children's journals in a really quick way. So we've done some notes. We've got 4 children in there, and this is a group observation. I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but again, it's another way to be really quite efficient with your observations. If you've got children engaging in an activity together, then in many ways it makes sense to at least start with an observation that's as a group. You can split an observation so that it's one child for one obs, and there can be some advantages to that. But if you want to talk about that, please just bring that up later. I'm not going to demonstrate it now. Now, in Tapestry, people used to be using the assessments a lot of the time, and for reception classes, there'll still be scope for that in the, you know, towards the end of the year when the early learning goals are being thought about. Some settings will make observations where they spot early learning goals and work in that way. But for a lot of settings now, it's the flags that are potentially important. Again, you don't have to use them at all, but if I just show you where it says pick flags there, you can choose. Now I've got a number of these flags active here, but for a lot of settings, it will be the characteristics of effective learning that settings use. Or this section here, at the bottom, it says EYFS 2021, which has got the strands from development matters there. And if you are a setting using birth to 5 and you've got these subcategories, then those could be used as well. Let me just tap one of those. And so you'll see that I'm clicking a box, tapping a box, and it's then tagging that this observation belongs to that part of the curriculum. Let's go to literacy. Now, I'm not going to put it in there. I'm going to put it in communication and language, speaking. Or now, get this clear. Tapestry will let you turn off these sub-level orange ones, so that it's just the main part that is flagged. So if you're just using the main 7 strands of development matters, then you can do that. But if you're a setting using birth to 5, then you can use these ones as well. Now I've probably tagged more of these than you would typically do. You might just tag one of them, but it allows Tapestry and it allows practitioners to build up that jigsaw puzzle of these different elements. If you don't tag these, then you're going to just have a running order of observations, and it can be more difficult to then look back on observations that have been done. So, for example, maths is there. If your observation is to do with maths and you tag maths, a teacher typically or preschool nursery staff might look back and say, I want to see the maths observations for this one child, and by tagging that, it allows them to do that. I hope that makes some sense. I probably shouldn't have tagged quite so many. Let's take that one off. So we've got understand the world, communication and language, and I have tagged the world in there. Settings need to decide which of those flags they want all of their staff to use. There's no point, some of you tagging certain ones and some of you not tagging other ones. My instinct is, if you want a stripped down simple system, just stick to those 7 flags there. And that's about it. I've been through the process there of creating an observation. Again, I'd like to say, well, there's no particular order in which you have to do things. I guess most observations might start with taking some photos and then it gets pulled into here. It's quite possible that something of note happens in your setting, and then you want to note it in here. You don't have any photographic evidence, and so you might just make an observation with a couple of sentences to say that this thing had happened. Remember that everything in here, for most settings, gets shared with relatives at home, and so part of the point of Tapestry is that communication element for staying in touch with families. Now I've just pressed upload again and it will have updated here, and you'll see here that down the bottom, just off to the left, it says add to journal. So I can tap add to journal, and it's now in that child's journal, or in all 4 of those children's journal, as an observation done. I can remove it again if I wanted. There we go. Simple as that. Add and remove. Now, if you're a support staff member, you might not have the ability to put it into the journal. It might be that your permissions on the account just let you create the observations, but not do that final sort of publish element. You might be very pleased about that, because it means that it's in someone else's hands, someone else's responsibility, that things are written how they want them to be, or whatever. So systems like that can exist in settings and work well. Another thing I guess I would point out in the app here is that in the bottom left, it says no filters there. Well, I can filter here, and if your setting is such that you perhaps only work with children of a certain age, then you can perhaps go to cohort and choose one of these groups, and that will then only show observations that relate to that cohort. Bottom left again, I could take that one off. Hang on a minute, go to no filters. Sometimes settings have groups. If you have different rooms of children, they might have groups set up, so you can filter to a group. We go filter to the treetops group, and now it's only going to show observations that relate to those children who are in treetops. Similarly, when you create observations, and I go to pick children, at the bottom here, there's a filters part. So I could filter to a group that's set up, and then I'll only see the children who are relevant to me. And of course, in a setting that might have, 100 children in it over the course of a week, part-time children, different rooms and what have you, that can be a really, really useful thing, because you don't want a list of 100 children to scroll through. Much better to just have the ones that you work with. So there's various ways of managing that. If the manager of a setting wants to talk to me about that, I'm more than happy to go through how that can be set up. Right, let's cancel that one. And the nice thing about that filtering is that it remembers it. Okay, so it will remember what I want for the future. Right, I'm going to come out of there